Junior Observer Zix 427 pressed his primary sensory appendage against the quantum viewing screen, mandibles twitching with growing anxiety. Something wasn't right with the numbers. After 3 centuries of monitoring the supposedly primitive humans, this was the first time the standard algorithms had thrown an error he couldn't explain. "Explain yourself, Junior Observer," Overseer Nax demanded, her crystalline form shimmering with irritation. "You've disrupted the entire observation network with your theories." Zix's appendages trembled as he manipulated the holographic display. "Overseer, observe the human power consumption patterns over the last 50 years. He highlighted a series of seemingly random fluctuations. They show a civilization barely managing sustainable fusion power yet. Yet what? Observer, I see nothing but the expected output of a level 2 civilization struggling to leave their gravity well. That's just it, Overseer. Their power signature is too perfect." Zix pulled up another dataset, this one showing atmospheric readings. "Look at their carbon emissions. They follow a textbook pattern for industrial development, almost as if. As if what? Nax's crystalline structure darkened ominously. As if they're deliberately producing them. Zix's voice dropped to a whisper. "We monitor civilization development by looking for specific patterns. What if the humans learned these patterns and are now manufacturing false data?" The observatory chamber fell silent. 3 other observers paused their work, their various appendages and sensory organs turned toward the conversation. "Impossible," Nax declared, but there was a hint of uncertainty in her harmonic resonance. "No species has ever." "No species we've encountered," Zix corrected, immediately regretting his boldness. "Overseer, humans have something none of our previous observation subjects possessed. Paranoia. They create entertainment about being watched by superior civilizations. Their literature is filled with scenarios about hiding from more advanced species. What if? Enough." Nax's crystalline form pulsed with anger. "You suggest these primitives, these emotional, short-lived creatures have not only detected our observation network, but have been deliberately feeding it false data. Do you realize how this sounds?" Zix activated another display, this one showing human military movements. "Their space forces are primitive, yes, but look at their patterns. They never venture beyond certain points. Their ships always turn back at specific coordinates. It's as if they're performing for us, staying within a carefully choreographed space. Correlation doesn't imply causation. Junior Observer, this was covered in your basic training. But Overseer, what about the asteroid mining operations? Their efficiency ratings are too low. They're extracting resources at a rate that barely justifies the operation costs, yet they continue. Unless. Unless what? Unless they're hiding their true extraction capabilities. The humans have an old military doctrine called strategic deception. They're masters at it. During their last global conflict, they built entire fake armies to mislead their enemies." Nax's crystalline structure vibrated with what might have been concern. "You've been studying their military history, Observer. That's outside your assigned parameters." "I had to, Overseer. Something about their development pattern felt wrong. They advance in bursts, then plateau for decades. No other species we've observed follows this pattern. It's as if they're deliberately pacing themselves, waiting. Waiting for what?" Zix's appendages waved in the equivalent of a shrug. "I don't know, Overseer. But I've compiled data from multiple observation posts. The humans are building something in the asteroid belt. Something big. Our sensors can't penetrate it. We assume it's a mining operation because that's what our algorithms expect to see. But before he could finish, alarms blared across the observation post. The quantum viewing screen flickered with urgent reports from the patrol fleet near the human's outer system. "Overseer," one of the other observers called out, their voice modulated with fear. "The patrol fleet. They've encountered something. Something impossible." As the first images reached their screens, Zix felt his worst fears confirmed. The humans hadn't just been hiding their progress, they'd been preparing for war. And now, as he watched the massive human vessel reveal itself, he realized they'd all been played for fools. The age of comfortable superiority was over. The humans had arrived. Captain Jack Morrison stood in the dimly lit bridge of the HSS Thermopylae, his weathered face reflected in the crystalline displays that lined the command center. The bridge itself was unlike anything depicted in centuries of science fiction. No bright lights, no unnecessary displays, just an efficient combat center designed by people who understood that space warfare would be fought in the dark. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had trained for this moment for decades. "Stealth systems nominal, Captain," Lieutenant Rivera reported from her station. "The quantum wake dispersion is holding steady at 0.001%. We're practically invisible to their sensors." She allowed herself a small smile. "Those arrogant bastards are still scanning for tachyon emissions, just like we predicted." Morrison nodded, running his hand along the captain's chair, not the elevated throne seen in movies, but a practical combat station integrated with the ship's neural interface system. The Thermopylae was humanity's masterpiece, but not for the reasons their alien observers would expect. While they looked for massive energy signatures and exotic particles, humanity had gone in the opposite direction. "Engineering reports ready." "Sir," Commander Chen called out. "Gravity drives are spooled and waiting. We're maintaining our position inside the asteroid's shadow." He paused, checking another reading. "The Concordat patrol hasn't deviated from their standard search pattern. They still think this is just another mining operation." Morrison felt a fierce pride as he studied his crew. Each member had been chosen not just for their skills, but for their ability to think differently. The Thermopylae didn't need robots or AI to function. It needed human ingenuity, the kind that had kept their entire spaceship program hidden from alien observers for over 50 years. "Weapons?" Morrison asked, though he already knew the answer. His weapons officer, Sarah Watson, had been running checks hourly for the past week. "All kinetic launch systems primed, sir. Gravity assist calculators are locked in." Watson's fingers danced across her console. "I still can't believe these idiots never thought to weaponize gravity itself. They've had FTL travel for millennia, and they never once thought to use it like this." Morrison understood her amazement. The Thermopylae's main weapons weren't the plasma cannons or energy beams the aliens would expect. Instead, they had perfected what humanity did best: throwing rocks. Very, very fast rocks, accelerated by gravity manipulation to velocities that would turn a baseball-sized projectile into a planet killer. "Signal from command." "Sir," Communications Officer Park announced. "We have authorization to proceed with Phase 1. They're transmitting the final intelligence update from our deep cover probes." Morrison accessed the data through his neural link. The images confirmed what they had suspected. The Concordat's arrogance had left them vulnerable. Their ships were built for fighting enemies like themselves, with massive energy shields designed to deflect plasma weapons and energy beams. They had no concept of kinetic weapons accelerated by gravity drives. "Let's review the mission one final time," Morrison announced, his voice carrying across the bridge. "For 3 centuries, they've watched us, thinking we were primitives barely able to reach our own moon. They'd monitored our power emissions, our resource consumption, our technological development. And we fed them exactly what they expected to see." He stood, pacing the bridge's central walkway. "While they watched our decoy programs, we built this ship and others like it in hollowed-out asteroids. While they monitored our primitive fusion experiments, we perfected gravity manipulation technology. They're expecting a civilization that's barely achieved spaceflight. Instead, they're going to meet humanity at its finest, clever, prepared, and really damn good at hiding our strengths until the perfect moment." A soft chime indicated the patrol fleet was moving into position. Right on schedule, just as predictable as every Concordat fleet movement had been for centuries. "Take us out, Helm." "Nice and slow." Morrison settled into his command station, feeling the neural interface sync with his consciousness. Let's show these watchers what humanity can really do. The Thermopylae glided silently out of its asteroid berth, its hull designed to absorb rather than reflect sensor signals. They were humanity's first real warship, and in a few minutes, they would teach the galaxy why humans had spent so much time studying naval warfare instead of building flashy energy weapons. The hunt was about to begin. High Commander Vex Terry of the Concordat Patrol Fleet considered the human mining operation with the kind of contempt reserved for insects. His massive dreadnought, the pride of enlightenment, dwarfed the primitive human structures scattered across the asteroid's surface. The other 4 ships in his battle group moved into standard pacification formation, a maneuver they'd performed countless times against other upstart species. "Prepare the standard warning broadcast," he ordered, his tentacles rippling with amusement. "Let's see if these primitives even understand subspace communications yet." Before his communications officer could comply, every sensor on his bridge screamed in alarm. Space itself seemed to twist behind his fleet, and something impossible emerged from the void. "High Commander." His science officer's voice cracked with panic. "Unknown vessel. It's... The readings make no sense." The HSS Thermopylae revealed itself like a predator shedding its camouflage. Its hull, covered in radar-absorbing metamaterials, seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. But what truly terrified the alien crew wasn't its size. It was the complete violation of everything they thought they knew about shipbuilding. "Sir," Morrison's voice carried across the Thermopylae's bridge, "they're scanning us with everything they've got. Should I patch through their comm chatter?" "Let's hear it," Morrison replied, allowing himself a slight smile. The bridge filled with panicked alien voices. "The hull is too thin. It should collapse under its own mass. Where are their shield generators? I'm reading no energy fields. Those can't be weapons. They're just hollow tubes. By the first ones, what are those gravitational distortions?" Morrison keyed the ship-wide comm. "All hands, this is the moment we've trained for. Weapons, target their engines but don't fire yet. Let them stew for a minute. Let's show them exactly what those hollow tubes can do." On the Pride of Enlightenment, Vex Terry struggled to understand what he was seeing. The human vessel defied every principle of space combat his species had developed over 10,000 years. Its design was wrong, its weapons made no sense, and its very existence seemed to mock the Concordat's technological supremacy. "Demand their surrender," he ordered, falling back on protocol. "Remind them of the Concordat's authority over all spacefaring races." The demand was broadcast. The response came not in words, but in action. The Thermopylae's hollow tubes, its kinetic launch systems, oriented toward the alien fleet. Gravity manipulation fields, invisible to conventional sensors, began forming complex acceleration corridors. "Target locked," Watson announced on the Thermopylae's bridge. "First volley ready." "These are just the small ones, sir. Tennis ball-sized." Morrison nodded. "Show them what humanity's been working on while they weren't looking." Fire. The kinetic projectiles launched without flash or sound. Accelerated by precisely controlled gravity fields to a significant fraction of light speed, they crossed the space between the ships almost instantly. The aliens' energy shields, designed to deflect plasma and laser fire, might as well have been tissue paper. The first volley reduced one of the patrol ships to expanding debris. The aliens had never encountered weapons like this, simple projectiles moving so fast that their shields couldn't register them before impact. "Impossible!" Vex Terry screamed as a second patrol ship disappeared in a flash of light. "Their technology is primitive. We've been watching them." "This is Captain Jack Morrison of the HSS Thermopylae." Morrison's voice boomed across all frequencies. "You've been watching what we wanted you to see. Consider this a demonstration of what you missed. The next volley won't target your engines. Stand down." The remaining ships froze in space, their crews confronting a terrifying reality. Humanity hadn't just caught up to them technologically. They'd developed in an entirely different direction, creating weapons and defenses the Concordat had never imagined. As Vexteri gave the order to stand down, he realized this wasn't just first contact. This was the moment the Concordat's dominance of space ended. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, not with a whimper, but with a demonstration of power that would reshape the balance of power forever. And this was just the beginning. "Begin recording," Morrison ordered, his voice steady as the Thermopylae maintained its position among the debris of the destroyed patrol ships. "Let's make sure the entire Concordat sees what happens next." The remaining alien vessels hung motionless in space, their crews paralyzed by a combination of fear and fascination. On the Pride of Enlightenment, High Commander Vexteri watched in horror as his science officer tried to make sense of the human vessel's capabilities. "Demonstration 2, Morrison announced across all frequencies. "Since you're all probably wondering how we achieved this level of technology without your notice, consider this an abbreviated physics lesson." Lieutenant Rivera activated the ship's gravity manipulation systems, and space itself seemed to ripple around the Thermopylae. The debris field from the destroyed patrol ships began to move, not randomly, but in precise patterns. "Your civilizations mastered gravity for propulsion," Morrison continued, "but you never thought to weaponize it. You saw it as a tool for movement, while we saw it as a force to be shaped. Watch carefully." The Thermopylae's gravity drives created a complex web of gravitational fields. Debris from the destroyed ships formed into a swirling vortex, each piece accelerating along carefully calculated paths. The alien sensors registered gravitational forces that should have been impossible to control with such precision. "Sir," Watson reported from her weapons station, "the aliens are attempting to analyze our gravity manipulation signatures. Should we show them the full capabilities?" Morrison nodded. "Let's give them something their sensors can't possibly misconstrue." Execute Maneuver Delta 7. The Thermopylae began to move in ways that defied conventional physics. Rather than the straight-line acceleration the aliens expected, it curved through space as if it were swimming, using gravitational fields to pull and push itself with impossible agility. By the first ones, Vexteri whispered as his science officer's instruments overloaded. "They're not just manipulating gravity, they're surfing it. Your civilization spent millennia trying to brute force your way through space." Morrison's voice carried a hint of pride. "You built bigger engines, stronger shields, more powerful weapons. But humanity, we looked at space differently. We asked different questions." To demonstrate his point, the Thermopylae launched another volley of kinetic projectiles. But this time, instead of flying straight at their targets, the projectiles curved through space, riding gravitational waves like missiles following a wire. "Your shields are designed to stop energy weapons," Morrison explained as the projectiles danced through space. "They create barriers against plasma, lasers, and particle beams. But they can't stop what they can't detect. Our projectiles are simple matter, accelerated to relativistic speeds through gravity manipulation. No energy signature to detect, no plasma to deflect, just pure kinetic force." On the Pride of Enlightenment's bridge, the science officer finally understood. "High Commander, they've developed their technology along a completely different path than any known civilization. They're not using conventional physics. They're manipulating the fundamental forces of space itself." Morrison allowed that to sink in before delivering the final demonstration. "And now, for those in your scientific community who still doubt our capabilities, watch this." The Thermopylae activated its full gravity drive array. The space around it began to twist and fold, creating what appeared to be a localized gravity well. But instead of drawing things in, it began to shape the very fabric of space-time. "You see space as something to travel through," Morrison's voice carried across the stunned silence. "We see it as something to shape, to mold, to use as both weapon and shield. Your sensors show our hull as too thin because they can't detect the gravitational architecture supporting it. Your weapons can't lock onto us because we're not where we appear to be. The demonstration ended with the thermopylae returning to its original position, the debris field settling into a perfect orbital pattern around it. The message was clear. Humanity hadn't just matched alien technology. They'd reimagined it entirely. "This concludes today's physics lesson," Morrison announced. "I suggest you take this recording back to your Concordat. Let them know that humanity is ready to talk as equals, or to continue the demonstration, if necessary." As the alien vessels prepared to retreat, Morrison turned to his crew. "Send the full sensor data to command. The galaxy needs to understand. Humanity didn't just join the space age. We rewrote the rules." The grand chamber of the Galactic Concordat had never been so chaotic. Representatives from 300 species filled the massive amphitheater, their voices rising in a cacophony of fear and outrage as the recording from the Pride of Enlightenment played on the quantum holographic displays. Supreme Chancellor Zorix, a beam of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, tried to maintain order. "We will have silence." Their voice resonated through the chamber. The human question must be addressed with reason, not panic. From his position at the witness podium, High Commander Vexteri's tentacles trembled as he recounted his encounter. "You don't understand," he insisted, his usual military decorum shattered. "The recording doesn't capture the full horror of what we witnessed. They weren't just using advanced technology. They were using it in ways we never imagined possible." The chamber's displays shifted to show technical readouts from the patrol fleet sensors. A Mechanian analyst, their cybernetic systems specifically designed for military assessment, stepped forward. "Esteemed members of the Concordat," the analyst's synthetic voice cut through the noise. "Our initial assessment of human capabilities was not merely wrong. It was deliberately manipulated. We have detected no less than 57 stealth vessels, similar to the thermopylae in Concordat space. They've been there for months, possibly years." The chamber erupted again. A hive mind representative's 1,000 voices spoke as one. "Impossible. Our quantum detection grid covers every approach to Concordat space." "That's exactly the problem," the analyst continued, projecting new data. "They don't use quantum signatures. They don't use subspace fields. They developed entirely different methods of space travel and combat. Our detection systems were looking for the wrong things." Supreme Chancellor Zorix's crystalline form pulsed with concern. "How did we miss this level of technological development? Our observation posts were compromised." A new voice interrupted. The chamber turned to see Junior Observer Zix 427 entering, his appendages clutching a data crystal. "I tried to warn the Oversight Committee. The humans knew we were watching. Everything we observed was a carefully crafted deception." The data crystal's contents appeared on the displays, centuries of human technological development, but now with anomalies highlighted. Patterns too perfect to be natural. Power signatures that made too much sense. Resource consumption that followed textbook models too precisely. "They fed us what we expected to see," Zix explained. "While we watched their primitive space stations and basic fusion reactors, they built an entire shadow civilization in their asteroid belt. They didn't develop along our technological path because they knew we'd be watching for those signatures." A military representative from the warrior-cased Krell slammed their combat gauntlet on the podium. "Then we must strike now, before they can deploy more of these vessels." "That would be unwise," the Mechanian analyst countered, displaying new tactical simulations. "The thermopylae demonstrated only a fraction of human capabilities. Our models suggest their gravity manipulation technology could be used to collapse spacetime itself. They could turn entire star systems into weapons." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just caught up technologically. They'd developed weapons that could render conventional space combat obsolete. Chancellor Zorix's form flickered with decision. "Show the latest intelligence." The displays shifted to show new images. Human stealth ships appearing and disappearing near critical Concordat installations. Military bases, shipyards, population centers, Nowhere was safe. They hadn't just penetrated Concordat defenses. They'd mapped out every strategic location. "We're receiving a transmission," the communications officer announced. "From Earth." The chamber's main display activated, showing Captain Morrison's face. His expression was neutral, but his eyes carried the weight of centuries of human preparation for this moment. "Greetings, members of the Galactic Concordat," he began. "By now you've realized that humanity has been aware of your presence for a very long time. We could have revealed ourselves years ago, but we wanted to be ready. Really ready." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We're not interested in war. We're interested in recognition. Equality. A seat at the galactic table. The choice is yours, but choose carefully. The Thermopylae was just our introduction. We have so much more to show you." The transmission ended, leaving the Concordat representatives to face a terrifying truth. The age of unquestioned alien superiority was over. Humanity had arrived, and they'd brought centuries of hidden progress with them. The Concordat's response came not through diplomacy, but through force. 300 warships, representing the combined might of their military forces, emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Their energy signatures blazed like artificial suns, a deliberate show of power meant to intimidate. In the Thermopyla's command center, Morrison watched the display with calm determination. "Right on schedule," he noted, "just like the simulations predicted. Battle control. Execute Operation Salamis." Across the asteroid belt, dozens of previously hidden human vessels activated. They didn't announce their presence with energy signatures or dramatic reveals. Instead, they'd move like sharks through dark water, their gravity drives creating ripples too subtle for standard sensors to detect. "Sir," Lieutenant Rivera reported, "all ships confirm position. The Concordat fleet is following standard combat doctrine, exactly as our historical analysis suggested they would." Morrison nodded, remembering the years spent studying alien battle tactics. The Concordat's military, for all its technological advancement, had become predictable. Millennia of unopposed dominance had bred a rigid, inflexible approach to warfare. "All ships, execute Phase 1, Morrison commanded. "Let's show them why humanity never stopped studying naval warfare." The asteroid belt came alive. Hundreds of gravitational anomalies appeared simultaneously, each one precisely calculated. The human fleet wasn't just using the asteroids for cover, they were turning the entire field into a three-dimensional recreation of ancient Earth naval tactics. "By the first ones," a Concordat commander exclaimed as their sensors tried to make sense of the gravitational chaos. "They're changing the local space-time geometry. Our targeting systems can't compensate." The Thermopylae led the charge, but not in the way the aliens expected. Instead of engaging directly, the human ships created a complex series of gravitational corridors, spatial choke points that forced the Concordat fleet to split into smaller, more manageable groups. "Just like Thermopylae," Morrison murmured, appreciating the historical parallel. "Except this time, we're fighting in 3 dimensions with gravity as our terrain." The first wave of kinetic projectiles struck the separated Concordat ships. But these weren't simple relativistic projectiles. Each one rode a precisely calculated gravitational wave, curving around obstacles and striking from impossible angles. The aliens' energy shields, designed to repel front-facing attacks, proved useless against weapons that seemed to ignore the conventional laws of motion. "Second phase," Morrison ordered. "Show them why we studied fluid dynamics for space combat." The human fleet moved in patterns that mimicked ocean currents, creating gravitational eddies and vortexes that pulled apart the rigid Concordat formations. Ships that had never needed to consider three-dimensional combat found themselves being dragged into artificial gravity wells, their energy-heavy engines struggling against forces they weren't designed to counter. "Their flagship is trying to coordinate a response," Watson reported from her weapons station. "But their command structure can't adapt fast enough. They're still trying to fight according to their manual." Morrison allowed himself a grim smile. That's the problem with being undefeated for too long. You forget how to innovate. He keyed the fleet-wide comm. All ships, execute Trafalgar maneuver. The human fleet split into smaller groups, each one moving independently, but coordinating through quantum-encrypted channels. They weren't just fighting. They were conducting the symphony of gravitational warfare, using tactics that combined ancient naval strategies with physics the Concordat had never thought to weaponize. Concordat ships began to fall, not in ones or twos, but in whole battle groups. Their mighty energy weapons fired into empty space as human vessels seemed to phase through their own gravity fields, appearing where sensors said they couldn't possibly be. "Sir," Rivera called out, "they're attempting to retreat. Their formations are breaking down completely." Morrison watched as the mighty Concordat Armada, which had begun the battle as an intimidating display of power, dissolved into chaos. Ships designed for straight-line combat found themselves trapped in gravitational webs. Vessels that relied on energy shields were picked apart by kinetic weapons that curved through space itself. "Send the final message," Morrison ordered. "Let them understand exactly what they're facing." The transmission was brief. "This is just one system, defending itself with a fraction of our fleet. Consider carefully what happens if you force us to take the offensive." As the surviving Concordat ships fled in disarray, Morrison reflected on the irony. Humanity had spent centuries hiding its true capabilities, but in the end, it was their study of ancient warfare that had given them the edge in space combat. They hadn't just matched alien technology. They'd revolutionized how it could be used. The art of war had evolved, and humanity had written the new chapters. The Concordat High Command received a flood of resignation notices in the days following the Sol system disaster. Not from low-ranking crew members, from ship captains and fleet commanders. Battle-hardened veterans who had served for centuries were suddenly requesting immediate retirement. In a secured chamber deep within the Concordat military headquarters, Admiral Kiveth reviewed the psychological reports with growing alarm. The holoprojector displayed footage from various ship recordings, each showing a different aspect of human combat tactics. "Play the Terminus recording again," he ordered, his scaled fingers tightening on his command staff. The projection showed a human vessel, not the Thermopylae, but one of its siblings, emerging from what appeared to be solid rock. The gravity manipulation had allowed it to phase through an asteroid, using the dense material as both shield and cover. The Concordat crew's panic was audible in the background. "They're not just fighting us," a military psychologist noted, her luminescent form dimming with concern. "They're waging psychological warfare on a level we've never encountered. Every tactic is designed not just to defeat, but to terrify." Another recording played, a human ship creating a gravitational corridor that bent weapon fire back at its source. The Concordat crew watched their own plasma bolts curve through space, splitting into multiple trajectories like the heads of a mythological hydra. Latest intelligence suggests they've seeded entire sectors with what they call gravity mines, a strategic analyst reported. But they're not traditional weapons. They're more like traps, spatial ambush points that can be triggered at will. Admiral Kiveth accessed the casualty reports. The numbers were staggering not in their magnitude, but in their implications. Human weapons didn't just destroy ships. They did so in ways that haunted survivors. "Sir," his aide interrupted, "we're receiving new reports. The humans have begun implementing what they call hunting grounds." The main display shifted to show star charts. Entire asteroid fields had been converted into labyrinthine killing fields. Gravitational eddies mimicked ocean currents, creating spatial topology that human ships navigated with practiced ease, while Concordat vessels blundered into one trap after another. "They're recreating their planetary naval warfare in space," the psychologist observed. "These patterns, they mirror something called the Battle of the Atlantic. They're turning space itself into an underwater battlefield." A new alert flashed. The Thermopylae had been spotted near a major Concordat supply route. But instead of attacking, it simply appeared long enough to be seen before vanishing again. The psychological impact was devastating. Supply crews began refusing assignments, claiming they could feel human ships watching them from gravitational shadows. "Play the crew interviews," Kiveth ordered. The projector displayed a series of testimonies from survivors. Their stories shared common themes: the terror of weapons that ignored shields, ships that moved like predators rather than vessels, and a constant feeling that space itself had become an enemy. "They don't rely on overwhelming force," a veteran captain testified, his mandibles clicking with anxiety. "They use our own assumptions against us. We expect ships to move in straight lines. They curve through space. We expect weapons to have energy signatures. Theirs are cold and silent. We expect space to be empty. They turn it into an ocean filled with predators." Morrison's voice echoed through another recording. "You've forgotten what it means to be prey. Humanity never had that luxury. We evolved watching the shadows, listening for predators, always aware that something stronger might be hunting us. We brought that heritage to the stars." The psychological impact was spreading beyond the military. Civilian ships were reporting ghost sightings, human vessels that appeared and disappeared at will, leaving only gravitational echoes as proof of their passage. Trade routes were being abandoned. Spatial coordinates that had been safe for millennia were now marked as potentially compromised. Admiral Kiveth stared at the final report, a comprehensive analysis of human combat doctrine. It wasn't just their technology that made them formidable. It was their understanding of fear itself. They hadn't just developed new weapons, they'd weaponized the primal terrors that lurked in every species' evolutionary memory. "Send word to the High Council," he ordered, his voice heavy with realization. "The humans haven't just defeated our ships. They've done something far worse. They've made the Concordat afraid of the dark again." The diplomatic chamber aboard Concordat Station, Alpha 1, had been redesigned specifically for this meeting. Gone were the towering podiums that once emphasized the Concordat's superiority. In their place stood a circular table, a human tradition that the aliens had quickly learned carried significant symbolic weight. The HSS Thermopylae hung visible through the station's quantum glass windows, its presence both a promise and a warning. Captain Morrison stood at the chamber's entrance, now wearing a formal diplomatic uniform, though his tactical neural interface remained active. Trust, after all, went only so far. "Welcome, Captain Morrison." Supreme Chancellor Zorix's crystalline form pulsed with carefully measured courtesy. "The Concordat is prepared to discuss terms." Morrison nodded, taking his seat. Representatives from 30 major species filled the chamber, their forms ranging from energy beings to silicon-based life forms. All of them had one thing in common: they couldn't stop watching the Thermopylae through the window. "Before we begin," Morrison stated, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of human preparation, "I want to be clear about something. This isn't a surrender negotiation from either side. This is about reshaping the galaxy's future." He activated a holographic display, showing the known galaxy. Tiny dots of light indicated human stealth ships, their positions revealing just how thoroughly they had infiltrated Concordat space. "We could have struck at any time over the past 50 years, Morrison continued. "We didn't, because humanity doesn't want dominion. We want partnership, but partnership between equals, not master and servant." A Mechanian representative's cybernetic eyes weird. "Your technology. It develops along paths we never considered. Our analysts still cannot comprehend how you masked your advancement for so long." Morrison smiled. "Because you were looking for progress that matched your own. Humanity took a different path. While you built bigger engines, we learned to bend space. While you enhanced energy weapons, we revisited kinetic physics. While you standardized your military doctrine, we embraced adaptability." He gestured to a data crystal on the table. "This contains our full technological database, everything from our gravity manipulation theories to our stealth systems. We're offering it freely with one condition." The chamber tensed. Chancellor Zorix's crystalline matrix flickered. "Name it." "The Concordat must change. No more superior and primitive species. No more technological hierarchies. Every spacefaring race gets an equal voice, equal rights, and equal protection under galactic law. The hive mind representatives' 1,000 voices hummed in confusion. You would share your advantages after proving your superiority. Morrison stood, pacing the chamber. That's what you still don't understand. Humanity's strength isn't our technology. It's our diversity of thought. Our ability to see problems from different angles, to question assumptions, to innovate. We're offering you more than our technology. We're offering you our perspective. He turned to face the assembly. The galaxy is vast and largely unexplored. There are threats out there none of us can imagine. We'll face them better together, learning from each other, than maintaining artificial hierarchies. Chancellor Zorix approached the table, their crystalline form resonating with decision. And if we accept these terms, what guarantees do we have? Morrison's expression softened slightly. The same guarantee we've always had, mutual benefit. Humanity joins the Concordat as equals. Our ships help patrol your trade routes. Our scientists work alongside yours. Our gravity manipulation technology revolutionizes everything from space travel to planetary development. He paused, letting his next words carry weight. But if anyone ever tries to establish dominion over others again, human or alien, they'll find that humanity hasn't revealed all its capabilities. The Thermopylae and her siblings will remain vigilant. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just a peace treaty. It was the dawn of a new era in galactic civilization. The Concordat would transform from a hierarchy into a true federation of equals. We accept, Chancellor Zorix announced, their form blazing with multiple colors. Let it be recorded that on this day, the Galactic Concordat began anew. As the representatives moved to sign the treaty, Morrison gazed out at the Thermopylae. Humanity had achieved something greater than military victory. They had forced the galaxy to evolve. The age of artificial superiority was over. The future would belong to those who dared to think differently, to question, to innovate. And humanity would lead the way, not through dominion, but through inspiration. The day their battleship arrived had changed everything. But it was what came after that would truly reshape the stars.